we just aired on FITE this past weekend called Redneck Brawl. And this was, I think it was Kentucky versus Georgia. And they did 28 fights in 3 hours. Because what they do, they do 3 1-minute rounds and put the guys in 16-ounce gloves. And as you could probably guess, a lot of these fighters, probably the first time, and maybe probably the last time they're ever in a ring.
An Empire Boxing and Unlearning Network production.
Welcome back to another episode of the Empire Boxing Podcast. This is a star-studded season 2, if I may say so myself, and I'm not just talking about myself, of course. I've got my co-host here, Matt Hoffar, for our first time co-hosting an episode, and we're very excited to introduce our guest for tonight. This is Mike Weber. He is the co-founder and chief operating officer at FITE TV, owned by Triller, formerly many things, a man of vast experience. But among the highlights for me when I was looking through it was director of media relationships for World Wrestling Federation and director of marketing for World Championship Wrestling. So tonight we're going from inside the ring to outside the ring, where pay-per-view production, media relationship, and all the magic happens. Michael, welcome to the show. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me on. I sort of am going to correct you on something here. As of today, FITE TV is known as Triller TV. So that's something that's just happening right now. I'm going to have to scrape that off my wall here, I guess, and everything. So that's a much breaking news. I don't know exactly when this is airing, when this is happening today.
And how does that feel for you, making a change like that with something so kind of near and dear to you?
Well, it is interesting, being here from the beginning. Over 8 years ago now, we started with FITE. We built it from 0 to over 8 million users. And, we're very excited about that, what we did. But, things got to change. It's hard to do it. Frankly, I never, in my 45 years of career, have I worked with one company where we kept the logo and then changed a pixel from day 1 to day 8 years. And I'm pretty proud of that fact there. And it got credibility in the business as user-friendly and a good experience. But we're branching out beyond combat sports now. We're adding more and more soccer, football, rugby, motorsports, other type of programming to the platform, even doing some music and some comedy specials as well. So it makes sense to change it. And then coincide that with Triller, our parent company, going public here over the next few weeks, probably in the January of 2024, it just makes sense. So we're excited. It's got a very positive feedback on it. Yeah, I think it's going to open up some more doors for us to continue to branch out in different type of programming.
Fantastic. Well, I guess the congratulations is in order from us as well then. Before I get going, I want to hear all about your backstory and kind of where you cut your teeth. But I got to ask you, is that a belt on your wall behind you? And what is that from?
It's a replica World Championship belt. I worked for WCW throughout the 90s. I left there in summer of 99. And that is what they gave me as a going away gift. So it's pretty nice.
Very cool.
Even has my name as a nameplate on it, so it's super cool. Yeah, it's
definitely
something you hang in your office.
You didn't have to suplex anyone to get it.
No, I didn't have to take any bumps. Actually, I felt like I did, but I never was in the ring. So it was a great experience working with WCW.
Oh, great. Well, Michael, take me back to the beginning. Was marketing and kind of media relations where you cut your teeth, or did you start on a different career path altogether?
Well, not completely all different. I always been around sports. I mean, I started one of those guys when I was about 13 years old, calling in the high school basketball scores to the local newspapers in Western Ohio. I remember this was before computers, fax machines. We had dial-up phones. We had to do it. I'd rush to find a phone booth and have to collect to a newspaper and read the scores. And then where I'm from is a very German area. And all these basketball players would have like 16, 18 letters in their last names. I had to spell them all out. It was a great experience. And ever since then, I grew up around sports. My dad's athletic director. He was a coach. Of course, I played sports all through high school and very active in college. But when I first got out of college, I was a YMCA director for 4 years. Fitness classes, youth leagues. So it's sort of similar to what I'm doing now in some ways, it feels like. But it's interesting. I got my master's from Ohio University in their sports administration program, and that really got me on the road to the career I really am in nowadays in essentially sports administration. Coming straight out of college here, I started an intern for about 4 or 5 weeks at WWF, where I was had the opportunity to work on WrestleMania 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is now a lot of people have talked to us before they were born. But I have memories like it happened yesterday from those events, and they were pretty interesting. Start to what's now one of the biggest entertainment empires out there, and sort of nice to say I was there at the beginning when they only had 60 employees, and I shared an office with the copy machine in Greenwich, Connecticut.
That's amazing. You're alluding to many great memories. What's one of them that stands out for you can share with us?
Well, the first one really is WrestleMania 2. You actually will see me sitting ringside if you really look, with some young guy with black hair and wearing a red tie. It was, frankly, even now, what they did in that event is unbelievable. The first hour originated from New York City, actually at Nassau Coliseum. Second hour is from the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago. Third hour is from LA Sports Arena. Well, LA Sports Arena doesn't exist anymore. Nassau Coliseum's, I guess, is being revived now. Horizons, I can't remember the name of it. They got a new name, but the building does still stand. But what the feature of that event in Chicago was, that hour, was to do a battle royal that featured at least, I think it was about 6 or 7 NFL football players. And yeah, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember who Refrigerator Perry was. He was one of the big stars there. The sad thing is, I think he's the only NFL player who was in that event who's still alive. Most recently, Russ Francis, who played tight end for the 49ers, died in a plane crash not too long ago. And it's sort of weird how many have passed away. But my job was twofold there. I actually, Mike, you're the intern. Of course, I was a little bit older. I was like 27. You said, okay, you work with the NFL players and get them wrestling boots, wrestling gear, and stuff like that. So I had that put together, and that's before we had seamstresses and all this kind of stuff like that. But Vince McMahon, the ballsy kind of guy he was, he self-insured every one of those NFL players' careers. And most of these guys were still, most of them were still active yet. You know, there's Harvey Martin, Ed Too Tall Jones from the Dallas Cowboys, and all these guys. My job was, I was told, if Refrigerator Perry falls out of the ring, catch him. So I sat around the ring there, and hopefully nobody got hurt. Also, another thing is, since you seem like you follow wrestling a little bit, that was the first match that anybody ever laid pads down on the floor around the ring. Prior to that, they always wrestled on concrete. They'll just have a concrete on the floor. And we actually went to a local elementary school, took the pads off the walls that they have, like, you know, the ends of the basketball court, so people don't crash into the concrete walls. That's what we laid on the floor. Took them from elementary school, laid it down there. And what I remember is how wrestlers who are watching it from New York and LA said, "Oh my God, what? I guess we got NFL players. We got pad everything for them now. You know, we got to cater to them and stuff like that." Because they thought, "Oh my God, you know, real men wrestle on concrete, not with pads." You know, so sort of an interesting perspective to really look at what all happened there. And now looking back, it's just that 1 hour. We got Ozzy Osbourne there. We had Claire Peller.
Wow.
Quick, do you know who Claire Peller is?
I don't.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Wendy's had this "Where's the Beef" commercial back in the mid 80s. And she was this like 80-year-old lady whose catchline was "Where's the beef?" Yes, we had her in the show. I mean, that's how ridiculous it was back then.
No way.
So, yeah, look up Claire Peller and you'll see what's up. In NFL players.
Were the
you know?
NFL players wrestling against the wrestlers?
Yeah, it was a battle royal. So there's about 15, 20 wrestlers there. Andre the Giant was in it. Big John Studd was in it. Easily another 6. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but Andre won it, of course. Yeah. But it was a real attention getter. I mean, obviously we got, you know, worldwide news out of it, great media support. And it's a great way for me to kick off a career in wrestling, because at that time, looking back, I'd only been there 4 or 5 weeks. And because I got hired by a guy named Basil DeVito, said, "I got something called WrestleMania 2. Would you be interested in coming in to see what it's all about and help us out a little bit?" I said, "Sure, I know nothing about wrestling, but it sounds interesting. I might learn something." You know, and
Yeah.
I
It's
shortly
a tough first
thereafter.
job to have. You never want to go back to like an office job after that, right?
Hell no. Which of course is all I do now is sit at my desk all day long every day. I don't even travel anymore. So it's I guess I'm at that office job finally.
Yeah, no, I was just asking how you got into working with Trump at Trump Sports, because that late 80s period was when Trump was the man. Right?
Yeah, so it is actually, well, I explain it's a pretty easy to figure out transition. So WrestleMania 2 was in 3 cities, New York, Chicago, LA. WrestleMania 3, which I ran the press box for, I was very excited, was in the Pontiac Silverdome, where they had the record attendance of 93,173. Yes, I still remember that number because I spouted it so many times over the last 35 years. WrestleMania 4 and 5 was actually from Trump Plaza in Atlantic City. And was from Trump Plaza, technically was not in Trump Plaza, it was Atlantic City Convention Center, which is a pretty big venue in there. They've actually played football indoors in there. And probably the weirdest thing about that event is now, related to current events, the guy who hired me to go work for him at Trump Sports from WWF, and one of the other guys I worked with on that event, I'm now working on another event today where we're going to probably make an announcement probably next week about how we're going to add sumo wrestling to our programming lineup. So all comes around. If I got a lesson to all the people out there, never burn bridges. I'm now working with a guy who was my boss 34 years ago. And it's sort of fun. So,
which were the biggest fights that you were a part of while you were with Trump at that time? Because I remember Tyson and Spinks was one of the big ones in '88 or '89, right? Were you there?
I was actually at that fight. I wasn't working there yet because I started in '89. But I was at one of the fights that Tyson did there that went less than 45 seconds.
91 seconds, he knocked out Spinks.
Yeah. But there was actually a second fight where it was just almost as short within the same time period. People were throwing beers at Donald Trump and everything else is crazy. The fight that I personally worked on the most, and one of the reasons I got so involved with them, was Vinny Pazienza against Hector Camacho. And that was in February of 1990. And at that time period, Trump, while we were part of the Trump casinos, there actually was 3 Trump casinos at that time in Atlantic City. Of course, there's none now. So there's the Trump Castle, Trump Plaza, and Trump Taj Mahal. And the concept that we were doing, which was new to the business at that time, is that we were buying all rights to that. So we had the live gate and the TV rights, of course, merchandising rights and everything else. And also, the other thing is, now looking back on it, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when the Pazienza Camacho fight happened, these guys weren't heavyweights. This is the first time a pay-per-view did not feature heavyweights. These guys were, I think, middleweights or someone like that, but they weren't heavyweights. And it's sort of interesting. Both those guys I worked with quite a bit, did press tours with them, and I've actually run not in the most recent years. I mean, Hector Camacho, I think, died almost 10 years ago. He was murdered in Puerto Rico. But I actually have crossed paths with both those guys over the years after that 1990 fight. And I remember doing the press tour because we did a 5-city press tour 1 week. Hector Camacho walked the dais. I mean, I could have written a book just off what we went through that whole week, and I was more so than I am now. I was into running. I'd go run with the guys in the morning. Then we took a plane to the next city each day, and I was a PR guy, coordinated all that stuff there. It was quite an experience to do that.
That's pretty cool. Is there a boxer today that reminds you of him and his style?
Who, Hector?
Yeah.
No, it's funny. Today I was talking to a guy representing Floyd Mayweather, and I was telling him essentially that story. That's why it came to mind here today. And, while Hector and Vinny were both very good fighters, they both also had out-of-the-ring personas and very interesting guys and different type of backups. I mean, a guy named Dan Duba put that fight together. And unfortunately, he passed away. Dan died over 20 years ago. His wife, Cappy Duba, is still in the business yet. You might know that name there. But he knew what showmen really were. And that's why that fight was so interesting, because it was probably one of the more similar fights to wrestling than there ever has been, because they had so much theatrics about them and their personas. And I went, working with Macho Man Randy Savage to working with Hector Macho Camacho. So there's a common thread there. But yeah, it was interesting. You know what? Believe it or not, I think Jake Paul is probably the closest to that right now, because he does have a life and persona beyond just being a boxer or a ring. And that's frankly why he's so successful, and actually has a big event that he's, unfortunately, FITE, Trilogy TV, is not airing this week. It'll be our first Jake Paul fight that we have not aired. DAZN did a deal with them we couldn't compete with, because they're doing it to drive their subscription program, which is obviously, I think, good business on their part. Not great for us, but it's the way it works. But we're still good friends with Jake Paul and his team. Nikisa Badarian, his manager, is a great guy to work with. And talking about fights, the record holder fight for viewership on FITE is a Mike Tyson-Roy Jones fight from about 3 years ago, which I actually worked with Nikisa to negotiate to get the TV rights. And we had over 700,000 people buy it on FITE. In addition to the other 800,000 who bought it on cable satellite. So again, we're quite proud of that milestone in our organization. And I don't know if I'll ever hit it again. It was one of those times where it was a perfect storm, because it was the Saturday after Thanksgiving on November 2020, where most people in the United States, for the first time, were going with their family for the holidays or stuck at home. And there wasn't that much football. And what else were we going to watch? And also has Snoop Dogg involved, Jake Paul, Mike Tyson. So it drew from a bunch of different categories of people. And it was just a great event they put together. Oh, and by the way, it was done by Triller. And therefore, that's how we have getting acquired by Triller. See, everything leads one thing to the next.
I think that was one of them first. Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel like that and the Conor McGregor-Floyd Mayweather crossover, I feel, and I would love your opinion on this, were sort of the launch pads for this kind of next gen of boxing. You have, famous alumni coming back for an event that's very unique, has a very different twist on it, something that's so traditional. Boxing has been traditionally aired and represented in the same way. And then all of a sudden, Triller comes out of nowhere and puts on an event like that. And I think it was the first time that people had really seen something like that and really felt more of it intertwined modern culture, hip hop culture, everything into that event. I thought that was very unique. And then you see an MMA, to your point about Macho Camacho, this hybrid entertainer fighter coming in against, again, another famous alumni for sort of the first ever crossover boxing. Do you feel like those two fights were sort of the launch pad for this next generation that we're seeing in fight broadcasting and combat sport?
Yeah, I do. It's been interesting how it's been working out. It's something boxing needed really bad. There's been some really good boxers there, but the charisma and being outspoken just wasn't there. And this goes all the way back to Muhammad Ali. I mean, he changed the world of boxing back in the 60s and 70s. And it's interesting how you got to have that spark there every few years. Next one's coming on. I think Jake Paul's that guy right now. I don't know who the next one is. There's some other, Tyson Fury, obviously. He's also transcends the sports of boxing. It's pretty good. And of course, the weirdest thing about all this, I'm thinking about, Muhammad Ali and stuff. And guess who, two promoters that we're still working with, who I worked with back in 1990, Bob Arum and Don King. And they're both 92 years old now. Who the hell would have thought that back in 1990, that those two guys would still be relevant in boxing, let alone being alive, We just aired Don King probably by last week or two. We've done quite a few top-ranked boxing events over the years. And they're pretty interesting guys to deal with, that's for sure. And we'll see it. But I don't want to knock on because they've been so successful, but they're still doing things in the traditional way they've done that. And this is where Nikisa Badarian, with working with Jake Paul and owning their MVP Promotions, have come up with a lot of newer ideas of how to advance what they're doing in the boxing world. They've also supported women boxers, which I think is a a key part of the growth, because as recently as 5-10 years ago, while there was a few women boxers, you really wouldn't think of women boxing being a thing at all. And it has come a long way. Of course, I can say the same thing about pro wrestling. Women were only involved as valets, occasionally would wrestle. But we're talking about 3 or 4 women in the whole world who consider themselves full-time professional wrestlers. Now there's hundreds, if not thousands, of women who consider themselves full-time pro wrestlers and make just fine living from it.
Do you feel like there's still quite a bit of pushback from sort of, let's say governing bodies and people in the traditional ways of boxing? I'm just, what came to mind was, you're referring to Amanda Serrano and recently she just vacated her belts over a kind of a protest of not getting 3-minute rounds, 12 3-minute rounds. And to your point, this seems like we're at, the precipice of change in the sport of boxing. And for that to be a pushback still, and leading to, a pretty significant event, her vacating her belt. Do you still feel like there's some internal pushback? And then my follow-up question would be how much external pushback do you feel from fans?
So, one, boxing, which is a good thing, is highly regulated yet. So it's hard to change rules in boxing. Okay. It does vary from state to state, but Nevada and California have some of the strictest, boxing commissions. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's necessary. You got to protect people from injuries and so forth. The funny thing is, I think all the rounds should be 2 rounds, 2-minute rounds. Okay. I think it quickened the event. I did an interview on this recently, and there's some logic behind all this. For one, it's bare knuckle fighting, BKFC, has become very successful in the last 4 or 5 years that they've been in existence. We're good friends with them. They're actually a sister property of Triller, a sister to us. And we work with them on a daily basis, and we've aired every bare knuckle bet they've ever done. But one of the things is, it's a fast-paced show. The longest rounds matches or bouts are 5 rounds, 5 2-minute rounds. And it really keeps things moving along in the event. And I really think they should go from 3 to 2s across the board. And I just think it would pick up the pace of the shows and stuff like that. And, they've already gone from, when I started in the business, there's always 15 rounds for your big title events now. Now, you hardly ever will do anything over 12. I think it's pretty regulated there. And there's a lot of 8s and 10s. So I think they're going the right direction on that. But boxing is slow. But now I'll make another analogy on it. I'm pretty good at those. Do it is, what was the big story in baseball the past year? You had a clock of how long the pitcher had to throw the next pitch. And guess what? It's the best thing I think happened in baseball this past year. It shortened the games by, I think, 20 to 25 minutes. Instead of 3.5 hours, it went like 3 hours. A little more family-friendly, viewer-friendly, kept the pace up in the game. And even in football, if you've been watching football for a long time, they used to have huddles and in between every down, and they had to decide what the play was going to be. It take the full 40, 45 seconds to get there. Now guys are, as soon as their play's over, they're snapping the ball again within 20, 25 seconds. I find it much more exciting to watch football now than it did before. Games still run a little long yet, especially in NFL, but they're moving in the right direction.
Interesting. My brain went to, we're having these conversations right now where, boxing, the best don't want to fight the best. There's, the fights that boxing fans really want to see happen aren't happening. I'm wondering, if we combined that, because, there's reasons behind that, but if you combine that with shorter rounds, that would also change the entire combat strategy for a lot of athletes and their entire game as it is, right? We see, slow starts. Often the fight's not really going until the 5th, 6th round. And now you have other fighters that have a style that's let's get in and get the job done as quick as possible. But it would force slower starters or fighters that want to play a longer chess match to pick up the game and pick up the pace. You would get more of an, I don't want to say amateur feel and not be interpreted the wrong way because, amateur style is totally different. But in amateur, there is this hustle. It is I have to impress the judges and I have 3-minute rounds to do it. So I'm wondering, would you see pushback from some fighters who were already having challenges making the right kind of fights because I'm half with you on that. I think that's actually a really interesting concept.
Well,
what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think there's one more reason why the commission should consider the 2-minute round thing. Like in a lot of sports, we get tired, and when you're in that third minute of a 3-minute round, you get tired. You're more susceptible to injuries and get hurt. And
Absolutely.
you're not on your toes as much, and you're dropping your guard down and stuff like this, and might take a shot that you want to take it only a 2-minute round. So I think I don't know, it's just more I think about it, it just makes more and more sense to me what you should do there with the shorter rounds. Because I think it would be real good for boxing, and it's like everything else, you're trying to quicken the events up to appeal to the audiences there. And I think it'd be a much faster pace, and they wouldn't be feeling out to each other so much. There's more urgency to win the fight. And again, Bare Knuckles doing this, I mean, quite successful with it. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch a BKFC event, but I've loved them from day one. They're some of the most organized, fast-paced shows I've ever seen in combat sports. Now, I will tell you there's one other type of boxing out there. We just aired on FITE this past weekend called Redneck Brawl. And this was, I think it was Kentucky versus Georgia. And they did 28 fights in 3 hours. Because what they do, they do 3 1-minute rounds and put the guys in 16-ounce gloves. And as you could probably guess, a lot of these fighters, it's probably the first time, and maybe probably the last time they're ever in a ring. All weight classes. It was a redneck brawl. Yes, there's guys showing up with, black cutoff jean shorts in the ring, and wife beater T-shirts, and it's crazy, but it was entertaining because 3 1-minute rounds, and boy, that as soon as they literally put a crown on the guy after each round, and of course you really had to see the ring girl bikini contest they had, which was something out of this world. And but you know what? That's some of the most viewed program we have, and they have a sellout all the time. They're putting 8,000 people in an arena to watch this.
I want to ask you about that. Do you find, like, when you guys look back at the data, and maybe you haven't had a chance yet, I don't know, is it the same viewers that you're getting for your traditional boxing events, or is it a totally different demographic, and it actually helps you guys gain viewers and subscribers?
It's completely different. Like, for example, we've done quite a few Canelo fights. I think we've done 4 or 5 Canelo fights over the years. And most of those viewers, while we've done very great numbers of, the only fight they've ever watched on our platform were Canelo fights. It's interesting. One thing I love working about a company is technology first. The analytics are unbelievable. And one thing we found, and this was of a wrestling group, but it probably applies to boxing. So we thought this one group, well, they always do about, this number of buys each time. We thought it was the same number, same people. And we went and looked at it, the numbers, because they did like 70 events a year. And we found the average, most people only bought 4 of those 70 events. So while they're doing the same number of viewership each time, it was not anywhere close to being the same viewers. And it really helped us make some decisions on how to go forward with them. And actually what we did, we transitioned them from pay-per-view to our subscription service, which is now called Turlo TV Plus. And which I'm trying to get used to saying all the time. It's hard to change. We've been rattling off FITE in the middle of the night in my sleep. Yeah. We found out this way, those people who are interested enough to pay for it now can watch all the events. And it's working out quite well. But it's
they're coming,
analytics are interesting.
Yeah, and they're coming specifically for the event, not necessarily for one particular competitor too, right? Which helps you guys from a marketing standpoint. In
wrestling, that's very true. They're coming for the brand or the event stuff, whereas boxing, I mean, it's amazing. Like, especially some of these Canelo fights, people only cared about the main event. I mean, and you've been at events like in T-Mobile Arena there in Las Vegas, and you walk in the building at this time the show starts pay-per-view, every seat in the building is sold out, but there's 150 people in the building right then. It's ridiculous. Viewership is actually in boxing the same way, which still is crazy. And like one of the last Canelo fights we did, it went 12 rounds, and people were buying like crazy all the way into the 12th round. As soon as the fight was over, dropped off completely, stopped. And we never did do another buy. You know, it was up for sale for another week. But people continue to buy all the way to the very end to do it. And which mirrors, I mean, boxing, when I first started working with boxing, of course, this is going back many years, and after working in wrestling where people want to watch it from the opening bell, it just didn't make sense to me. Why are people paying all this money and not watching the undercard? Because there's usually some good undercard matches, you know. Matter of fact, I got contacted this afternoon. It just I don't know how this happens. Do you know who the boxer Michael Moore is? Moore? He was on the undercard of this Camacho Pazienza fight that I'm talking about from 1990. His manager contacted me today about wanting to do something with us to showcase his stable of boxers that he's promoting now. But what's the chances of something like that happening? And he just contacted me like 4 hours ago. You know, so somebody I worked with 33 years ago.
I wanted to jump into some of your work in motocross and drag racing and Monster Jam and all that. So if you have a boxing question, Matt, let's hit the boxing. Okay, great. So yeah, it was fascinating. I'm researching all of your work and all the different places, and you've been involved in sport broadcasting. And tell me about the transition from. It's like we have too many interests. Like, what is it? But tell me a bit about your work in drag racing, like the motocross, and how did your work with wrestling influence that? Because I believe in the timeline there was before boxing, after wrestling.
It was wrestling, boxing, motorsports, and I sort of stumbled into motorsports.
How much crossover is that?
Well, frankly, the motorsports I was working in was essentially wrestling on wheels. Okay, that's monster trucks. And the way I fell into it is because I was working for Trump, and they opened the Trump Taj Mahal. All of a sudden, they were losing $1 million a day. They went massive layoffs. Okay, we can't do these boxing events anymore. We were only a 4-person division, and I had zero interest in trying to find another job within the casinos. That just wasn't my thing. And the other 3 employees all did take jobs in the casino, and I just fully left and fell in this opportunity. A fellow OU grad who I still see as recently as 2 months ago, a gentleman named Jim Kaler, hired me there at what was then known SRO Pace Motorsports, and I was a PR guy with it. And monster trucks and supercross, again, I know I'm telling old man stories like a going out style, but that was the first quarter of 1990. I got to get my dates right. 1991. And the first Gulf War happened in the first quarter of 1991. I don't know if you remember your history. That was a 90-day war, okay? And our season was 90 days, that first quarter. And my job was to get press and media views. Of course, there was no social media and stuff. And sportscasts usually have like 2 to 2.5, sometimes 3 minutes budgeted for news. Well, during the war, they had 20 to 30 seconds, and all they could really do is go across the local sports. So monster trucks, supercross, they got pushed to the side because we weren't the hometown people or anything like that. And it was probably one of the hardest jobs ever. Try to compete with that to get coverage of our sporting event. And it was a tough quarter. But yeah, it was just one of those coincidental things that happened. But yeah, the motorsport, especially the monster trucks, obviously the show's been shipped to it, and then actually progressing on. So I did that for 2 years. Then I got a call from WCW, actually from a woman I worked with at Trump, who had been at Viewer's Choice, which is now known as In Demand pay-per-view. Hey, I need to be a PR guy. Somebody needs wrestling. I said, okay, well, I'm that person. Love to do it. Atlanta was an attractive place to go. Chicago was a little too cold. Well, I worked there 7 years through some of the most interesting times ever in pro wrestling. But then I actually went back to what SRO Pace at that time became SFX, then Clear Channel Motorsports. And the way I got involved with them again is we started doing wrestling-themed monster trucks. So we did that to sell on Hot Wheels, which you probably still see in the stores yet. We started that. And then we actually brought the monster trucks alive and made them real trucks there. We had a Sting truck, Goldberg truck, a Bret Hart truck, and they're huge sellers and fan pleasers and so forth. And that's how I got back into it. Did it for about 3 years, and then parted ways and got actually moved into working in a company where we were managing NASCAR sponsorships. So like Domino's has sponsorship.
I wanted to ask you real quick about your time at the WCW. You guys were going head to head with WWF at the time, right? It was called. I mean, you actually were more popular than them even for almost a full. I read it was like a year and a half where you guys were the ratings kings, right?
Yeah, 83 weeks. Eric Bischoff, who was the president of WCW at that time, actually has a podcast called 83 Weeks, and which just kills me when it comes to podcasts. There's a whole series of podcasts now. My good friend Conrad Thompson owns all these podcasts, and most of them are talking about stuff that happened back in the 80s and 90s while I was there, But people love talking about that stuff back then. But yeah, it was a very interesting time because when I went to WCW, they were on the verge of closing their doors. I mean, it was really that close. And we went from not being able to figure out how to get a couple hundred people to a TV taping at Center Stage in Atlanta to doing 40,000 people to Georgia Dome, I think it was 1998. And this is also the birth of the NWO brand, which even if you weren't following wrestling at that time, you still would know what the NWO was. And our show title was Nitro. Their show was Raw. And very competitive. Best thing that ever happened to wrestling at that time period.
It was also, I mean, doing the reading on it, it was like that was the time the internet was starting to become a thing, right? You had AOL, you guys were owned by Turner, right? And it's funny how 99 was...
Which I don't know if anybody even knows what CompuServe is anymore. I'll tell you, sir, a funny story on that. We started out as WCWWrestling.com, but because somebody was smart, got ahead of us, and Cyber Squat on WCW.com. And I think the guy had to be based in Georgia. And what we ended up doing is we gave him, I think we gave him like either $10,000 or $20,000 and like a couple boxes of T-shirts. And that he was happy as hell because he got all this wrestling T-shirt swag out of it all. So yeah, that's how we got that WCW.com, which I'm really curious where that goes anymore. I don't know.
Well, and then when the WCW tailed off, what was like? Was that the reason you had left, or was that just timing?
I'd already been starting to work with the guys in developing these wrestling themed monster trucks with my old boss, which in some ways probably wasn't the best idea to go back and work for it because it was sort of a tough place. But it still was an interesting time there. But seeing the writing on the wall, 1998, we had a banner year. The 1999, I just saw things sliding. The money was changing, the whole temperature, everything. And frankly, I didn't know if they were going to last another 4 or 5 months after I left. And they did last 18 months after that, but then they closed the doors on it and sold to WWF. And there's a lot of reasons why their demise was so unbelievably quick. A little bit was change in management, greed, just a little bit to pause. Felt like, we can do no wrong. Mismanagement of money, pay to wrestlers and so forth. And then, but the real reason was the top executives at Turner changed, and they didn't like wrestling. So, that's not the image we want. Because like TBS, we always called it the Andy Griffith Network, because that's what it was back in the day. So, running those programs, those reruns, and wrestling, and they wanted to change the image. And so, because there actually was opportunities for people to buy WCW, but they thought they were going to get the TV deal with it, because TBS TNT then, as is now, is still a coveted network to be on. And it just, they said, no, we do not want wrestling anytime. We don't care how much money we made off of you guys. We don't want you. And So it really went out with a whimper very quickly. And then WWF didn't really know how they wanted to deal with it, and didn't really capitalize on as much. And they really didn't spend very much money, but they got the library. And they had the foresight there in 2001 that library would be worth something in 10 years, which it very much was. And it was the basis of really getting the WWE network started and having all this library and then repackaging it, essentially revisiting what they call the Wrestling Wars of the late 90s there of Nitro versus Raw, which is I'd watch it because I was there for most of it. So it's a very interesting thing. And, with, if you can believe this, I just don't know if this would happen nowadays, guys being on one show for one company on one night and the next night being on the other company. Right. The Rick Rude, who I was good friends with, he actually had the distinction on being on both shows on the same night because one was pre-taped. And one he had full beard on, the other one he had shaved his beard off of, just to prove it. So it's just crazy things like that, So there's some fun stuff with it, and it was a wild time to be involved in that.
Do you, wrestling has always had such a really strong component of storytelling, which is kind of weaved into the marketing strategy and like the media around it, is creating these superstars and this fandom around the tale of their rivalries, etc. How is that woven into, boxing and motocross and other sports? Is there an element of that storytelling that you can take into those sports, or that is being taken into the sport even now to create more of an experience for the fans?
So, again, this is true with all media right now. It's a short attention span. Like you go on Netflix, I think they have a category of movies under 90 minutes because nobody wants to devote a whole 2 hours to watch a movie anymore. And I think it's important. And, but people want things quick. And that's the problem with boxing. Obviously, a boxer can't box every week. Hell, if he's a really top-notch boxer, he's not going to box more than 2 or 3 times a year. And, that's a lot. I mean, we'll see some of these boxers will go a year or 18 months between fights. And that's difficult to keep that storyline, credibility of who they are and what they are from fight to fight. Because wrestling, and guys have wrestled 3 times in the same night. But wrestling weekly is almost the norm. So that's why you can keep that. And that's what also is good, like with motocross and supercross. Supercross was just, there's some great storylines in there. Big rivals. They weren't afraid to, rub their handlebars together and stuff and drive them into corners, stuff like that. It made those guys have relatively, considering how dangerous Supercross is, most of those guys are having 7, 8, 10, sometimes 12-year careers, so they could build up those rivals over a long period of time. And Supercross, which is the wear version of motocross, because the difference is Supercross is in domes and stadium, whereas motocross is out in open fields. So when you're competing on essentially the size of a football field, it's tight, but you got everything's right there, and you're doing it like their season. I don't think it's changed too dramatically. It's like 15 races over like an 18 or 19 week time period. So it moves along pretty quickly. From pretty much from January to the first weekend in May, it runs. So you can really keep track of it really close. And that's what's so difficult on boxing. And frankly, I don't know how you get around that. You're not going to change that boxing because it's not healthy for a guy to fight any more than already do. And it's just, how do you keep them relevant between fights? That's difficult. It's hard.
You see it a little bit. It feels like some of the stories are almost forced and the rivalries are almost forced. Like the boxers know they need the story. But as you said, it's hard to create one when you're old because you're never going to fight the same guy twice in a year, very, very rarely, right? So even telling a story about someone you should fight doesn't really happen, right? And I don't know how you change it.
There's a handful of times. We aired, I think there's 3 Canelo Triple G fights in a row, but that was over 3 years, and to keep it relevant was not easy. And it was a good storyline. Even that was, I won't say forced, they're great fights, but it was unusual to be able to pull that off. And it did work. And I think they have 4th fight here, which we did not have the opportunity to air here the last year or so, which didn't really do as well because that you get stretched. and a little bit because of COVID and stuff like that, but it has stretched that rivalry over 5-6 years. Well, I think Triple G is almost 40 years old, so it's a little tougher. I'm sorry?
Yeah. With what happened recently with PBC moving over to Amazon Prime, do you think Apple and Netflix are next in the in the game to have boxing come on, or do you think it's not their brand?
Well, I don't think the Prime deal would ever happen if Showtime was still operating. PBC had a good relationship with Showtime. We had a good relationship with Showtime. Know those guys very well. Would never guess in a million years when we started this company 8 years ago that Showtime and HBO Boxing wouldn't exist 8 years later. Both those companies have been mainstays in boxing since late 80s, early 90s, and I'd worked with them through all that time period too. I'd worked with both of them back in the day there. And Amazon, seems like we're doing a great job investing in sport with what they're doing in football and baseball. And I think it's natural for them. Bruce Binkhouse, the gentleman who put that deal together, who I've had the opportunity to work with quite a bit, to negotiate pay-per-view deals for us. Good negotiator, knows what he's got to do to make it happen. I don't know the particulars of what the actual deal is. I don't know if they're, guaranteeing all kind of money or not. I have no idea. But it's a good platform to be on. Remains to be seen where we fit into that picture. Again, we've worked with PBC quite a bit this past year. I think the international rights will still be available to us for their big events. I'm not so certain about what's available to us here in the United States because I don't know if it's announced this way, I think Prime might have done a digital exclusive for that.
Right.
But never say never. When the Zone launched with Canelo, if you remember that correctly, I think it was 2019, is pay-per-view is dead. It's gone. And guess who does pay-per-view fights? That's now. So, but I got to, in all fairness to them, when we launched our platform, said, we're only doing pay-per-view. We make more money off those events than we do a subscription. We'll never do subscription. So subscription is a big part of our business plan now. So I guess they could throw that back in my face.
You mentioned FITE and 8 years ago. Talk to us a little bit about the origins of FITE, which you're a co-founder of, and then also I guess Flip Media was just before that. Which was that acquired by FITE, or how did that go down?
So Flips Media actually still exists. Yeah, that's our business name. It's all contracts on our Flips Media. Our banking's all Flips Media, and so forth. So actually hasn't changed. So this goes back to about 2013. I was working as head of marketing for TNA Wrestling, which ironically became Impact Wrestling at that time and just became TNA again this week. So they reverted. But I've been contacted by a gentleman named Mike Patel there who was working for, initially it's called iMedia Share. And it's started out completely as a tech function of streaming of, it wasn't even streaming that, it was only VOD. And they're doing digital apps for programming. This was actually doing stuff for NATO, for videos of fighter jets, what the heck they are ever doing and stuff like that. So people would watch on their mobile. And he pitched me to put TNA programming onto their platform. We talked, and then I don't believe in TNA, but I still work with them. And I started consulting for them. And we did our first test event. God, thinking back, I don't know why we picked that as the first test event. Well, first they were only going to do everything taped, and they had all kind of programming on Flips, okay? Very broad. It had Bloomberg News. It had movies on there, a little bit in sports, but nothing was live. It was all VOD programming. I said, hey, do you think we can do something live? And I think we can. So the very first test event we did was actually live from Tokyo, New Japan Pro Wrestling, something called Wrestle Kingdom 9. And that would have been January 2015. And we did a couple other test events, some in wrestling, but we did pro bull riding, PBR. And they worked well, and we're able to prove the concept, that they could stream events live from almost anywhere in the world. And that seemed to come out pretty well for us. And started doing a few more events, seeing that they're being successful. Then they offered me, he can come on as a full-time consultant, which lasted 2 weeks. I came on as a full-time employee. And then we decided to focus on the vertical of combat sports, hence the name FITE. And most of the program was pay-per-view. But when we started, all we were was an app on mobile. That's it. We were on Apple phones and Android. And then we didn't even have a website probably for 8-10 months where you could buy a program on our site. And then probably a year or two after that, we started putting on Roku, and then that led to Apple and Amazon. And now we're on essentially every platform known to mankind that Netflix is on. And of course, we're a native app for Samsung TVs and Vizio TVs and LG TVs and so forth. And it's going pretty good. But about the only other platform we're working on yet to put our network on is PlayStation.
Right.
That's about the only one left out there that we really could make work and have a good base there. And we've been working with them. They're great people. Just working through technology compatible with their technology is not the easiest thing sometimes. But we got a great technology team based out of Sofia, Bulgaria.
Amazing.
Just to clarify something, so what happens at this point with FITE, Triller, and then Flips? Is everything still...
So Flips is still our legal name for doing contracts and accounting and stuff like that. The checks, my paycheck, the checks sent to our programmers all say Flips on it. The FITE name, it's going to be out there a little bit just as a transitional thing. You're going to still see logos saying Triller TV powered by FITE for the people who do have that brand loyalty and brand recognition of FITE. So know that this is the same thing. Other than that, we're really not changing anything else. It's mostly the name and direction there because, and it really makes us, we actually had one contract with one of our football organization work with saying that we had to change the name in 6 months or they had the right to leave us because they didn't really like the name FITE. And I get it. It didn't really make sense for them. But I always counter, what can you tell me what ESPN stands for or what Google stands for? And stuff like that. But okay, people got tired of that argument and said, no, you really do have to change it to Triller TV. And it's really been rewarding this week how well it's been received.
Okay, so we recently had the former matchmaker for Golden Boy Promotions, Mr. Roberto Diaz, on, and he walked us through sort of like, for the fans that were curious, sort of the conception of how the matchmakers go out and do, how does a fight begin from a conception and idea, two managers, two matchmakers speaking, and then going into the contracts being signed and the fight actually getting into the ring. And I was wondering if you would be up for walking us through the conception of the fight, the contract signed, and how the fight comes across your desk and how it comes into the hands of the fan via pay-per-view.
So, it's really not very exciting because
that's funny because I think it's fascinating because I don't know anything about that side apart from the dabbling that we've done.
So on the very, very big fights, we're a supporting act. Okay, we're not the company who's funding it. We're not Showtime or back in the day HBO. There's like the Canelo fights were HBO fights initially. And they were putting the time into guarantee the purse. They were putting time into promoting it, doing the TV production and all of that. And we just became a digital extension of them because they didn't have a digital partner on it. Same thing worked on Showtime. Showtime's a little different because obviously their days are numbered right now, but they did have a digital solution to it, but it wasn't a full-time solution. I don't really want to knock on Showtime. But I think one of the keys to our success is that we're cranking out 30, 40, sometimes 50 live events a week. And they were doing a boxing event, once or twice a month. And it's hard to get your continuity of fans being used to coming there to watch your sporting events. So that's why we were so different than Showtime. And so we communicated the thing. Do they consult us on putting the fight together? Hell no. It mostly is now is, okay, we've got this fight here. We know you guys have delivered. Would you be interested in the rights? And then we essentially negotiate the revenue split. And then we've done so many events with so many of these people that we know everybody with the company. We know what we got to do in everything from anti-theft solutions to how we market it. Because, you don't want to step on each other when you're marketing it and everything. And again, this is where we had to sort of take a secondary position on some of the bigger fights. I'd rather take a secondary position than no position. And it's worked out all right for us there. Now, on more mid-level fights and stuff, do I get involved on who the fighters in the ring are? Absolutely not. I do not want to pretend that I'm an expert on boxing. Where I got a heavier career in pro wrestling, I still don't want to get involved with the matchmaking of wrestling either. There's art to it. And what we do is we work with them. Yes, we'll support you in this way. Here's what we'll do for you from marketing, the streaming. Yes, we'll air your weigh-in. Yes, we'll air your press conference. Oh, you're going to be doing a series of profiles on the wrestler. Of course, we'll air those. We'll put it on social media, stuff like that. So it's a much more comprehensive conversation of what we're going to do to support that event. And then it's also, what are you doing, the promoter, to support this event too? Because it's a partnership. And I'm not giving any inside news here on this, but they get the bigger part of the deal. They get a better percentage than we do. So I want them to help support the event too. So what are they doing to market it? Or what type of press conference? What's your hook out there and things like that? So that's really where the conversation's going. It's sort of nice. I'm starting to work with some people who are newer to boxing, and they actually work on things months in advance. You'd be surprised how short a time period of some of these events that we get the rights to. Sometimes we only get the rights to 2 and 3 weeks in advance. And there's a company called Boxer out of the UK. They got a habit of calling me on Sunday and say, hey, we got to fight next weekend. I said, come on, dude. I'd like to at least have 10 to 14 days in advance because, in all seriousness, SEO is very important to us. And to have it, you have to have the program up for sale, visible at least 3 days in advance at the bare minimum to get some traction that when people search for the fight, they can find it. And that's something I'm not an expert, but boy, we do have experts in our company on SEO, and there's so much to it. It's been a key to our success is knowing how to manage it and utilize it as a marketing tool to get people to watch shows on your platform. That's about as unsexy as possible as how to make it happen.
Honestly, I think it's super interesting, and I don't think many fans really even have a remote idea of how that process works or where sort of one entity ends and one entity begins. So I think that, I don't know, maybe I'm a nerd, but I think that's really fascinating.
Well, no, the interesting thing is, when we started, we had to work our butt off, prove a point. Fortunately, I knew a few people. We had consultants could help out, open some doors. But we had to, people had to test our technology. They had to make sure it worked because there were so many streaming services starting, 7, 8 years ago, and they were not working. The technology was not good. I was very fortunate to work in a company where our technology was good, and we had the right people working there to market it. And now, now sometimes we only talk. We just do text. Hey, you want the rights? Yeah, sure. Here's the split. Oh, okay, fine. We'll do it. And away we go. It's a text message. It's that unsophisticated right now to put some of our deals together because we work with so many of these promoters on a regular basis. They know what they're getting from us. We're not fly by night. We're here. We got a team of only 33 employees from around the world who are working, 60, 70, 80 hours a week on putting our program together, and everybody knows exactly what they're going to get and know what the communication trail is to make it work.
Do you guys find with much crossover and all?
Yeah, we do. We don't really have enough soccer data yet to really get a feel how they fit into the picture. But boxing fans will not watch wrestling. Wrestling fans won't watch boxing. They both boxing and wrestling fans will watch MMA programming. So that's sort of where it meets in the middle there. The viewing habits are so unbelievably different. In pro wrestling, we got a pro wrestling event December 30th. I haven't looked at the numbers the last day or two, I guarantee you we have several thousand buys already a month in advance. Okay. There's no technical reason why you got to buy it in advance. Okay. Back in the day, you did have to worry about technology issues and ordering stuff like that, but we don't have that issues. We haven't had that issue ever, but not be able to buy because too many people buy at one time. Boxing, as I said, people buy into the 12th round of the main event. They even the biggest, even the Tyson fight, where we had this unbelievable number in the morning of that event, we're only projecting, I think it might do 200,000 buys. We ended up doing 700. It just kept going and going and going. We just never would have guessed that was going to do that much. Wrestling also, 25% of the buy is usually in the 72 hours after the event's happening. A little bit has to do with that because we do have a very strong European fan base for pro wrestling. And then, of course, you're doing things at a time. But you'd be amazed, on Wednesday night at 1 a.m. in the UK, how many people are watching our shows live. I mean, it's crazy. I guess they don't have jobs to go to the next morning, or I don't know. I don't want to make any assumptions about the fan base there. But but
you haven't
they
matched
do.
the job data yet with
Yeah, I haven't done that research yet, but it's amazing how many people are watching live in the UK.
I'm going to speak from experience. My partner is British, and the culture would be they were on the quote, on the piss, end quote, and decided to tune in at 1 a.m. That's how that goes.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. And they have different priorities. And in all seriousness, these are the same people who are used to watching NFL games at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, earlier, all these weird times for events, stuff because of the different time zones around the world. So they are used to, major boxing events, pro wrestling events, all take place at 4 or 5 in the morning, UK time usually, and they'll watch it.
So what's next for you? Like after the company goes public, are you still excited?
Well, I am still excited. Hopefully I haven't portrayed anything different than that because it's a fun group of people to work with. It's a fun product to work with. Yeah. But I am 65. I am winding down a little bit. But then I'm dealing with all these guys on this sumo wrestling stuff. All three of the guys I'm dealing with are older than me. I've known them 30 years. I go, you guys, one of the guys is in mid-70s. Because this is my hobby now, and I go, I just do the stuff I like doing and the fun part of the job. I say, well, okay, I might have to do that. So I don't see myself completely closing the door and singing a rocker on the porch. But I do see myself slowing down a little bit here in 2024. And
we've had a lot of, it's funny how many times I've been approached in the last month, people asking me if we'd ever consider bringing sumo wrestling to Vancouver. So, honestly, Jana, it's like I've been asked by multiple different people that don't even know each other. So there's something there.
Well, the way they're laying this out and the guys that got working behind it are incredible. I mean, the gentleman who I worked for at Trump, also at one time, it was the COO of UFC. He also ran the Hard Rock Arena in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which had quite a few boxing events in. Another gentleman, Mark Taffet's a former EVP of HBO Boxing for 25 years. And then the third gentleman was a gentleman named Rich Rose, who used to be head of all sporting events for Caesar's Palace. And I worked with them on boxing events and Caesar's. So you could not find three more qualified guys to make it work. And then there's the owner. I've not got to know that well, but I traded emails with him today. I'm not quite as understanding of his background as these other three gentlemen, but those three guys alone, and they all happen to be good friends of each other. I was friends with them, so it's just funny. Don't burn bridges. I've talked to college students and stuff like that. I said, if you learn one thing, don't burn bridges, because come around and
it's a very good lesson.
It's real true too, because I have had some people burn bridges on me. I don't forget.
Mike, I'm kind of just sitting back thinking of, just this wealth of experience and knowledge and connections and just a deep understanding of tons of different aspects of the industry and in different sports. And I'm just so curious, like, looking back as, from the perspective of your early days, that's just the fan to, the director of sport at YMCA to where you are now, like somewhere is that feeling like it's a legacy that you've created. Like, did you ever think that you'd be here?
No, and even more so, I grew up in a real small little farm town in Western Ohio. I still get there about once a month. My mom's in a nursing home. She turns 91 next week. And
Wow.
so I still get there, and I grew up. We still have the family house. I grew up from this little high school stuff, which is huge in sports. That's all they're about is sports. High school sports. They go to state every year in football, and usually have pretty good, basketball and baseball teams and stuff. And I would have never dreamed of it. My dad was a school teacher, athletic director. That was probably more my idea where I would end up at, because I think my father's the oldest of 13 children. I think over half his brothers and sisters, my uncles, aunts were all teachers. So teaching was sort of the direction. My mom was a teacher. She taught piano at home for over 60 years. Still plays the piano every day yet in the nursing home. So that was really where I saw proudly. Be honest with that, I really didn't think about it much as a kid. I really was worried about where the party was at that weekend, and what I was going to do and who I was going to hang out with. But it's still, though, it's coming from that type of a background and having the opportunity to deal with all these events and be there when it happened. And I mean, in August, I actually had the chance to be at Wembley Stadium in London with AEW played there, and they had 81,000 there. And I'm one of probably like 4 or 5 people who was at the very first All-In event they did from Chicago. I actually worked in the truck for it. The first press conference announced there was going to be something called AEW. The first press conference they did to announce they're doing an event in Las Vegas. Being at that first event, being with a bunch of guys about AEW in a dugout in the Tokyo Dome prior to everything being announced. I happened to be at all those places with those people. And so it just would have been ridiculous not to go to Wembley and see it with a very short time period, 4 years or so, 5 years, I believe, to be exact, 5 years that they went to 81,000 seat stadium, filled it. So it's, I take it for granted sometimes, but now looking back, I say, oh, gee, I had a good opportunity to do a lot of different things, and it's sort of fun.
Yeah.
So,
have you ever thought about, have you ever thought about trying to kind of accumulate all of that and write a book about your experience, or is there someone underneath you that you mentor? How do you intend to pass on your legacy?
Well, I have thought about with the book thing. I got 2 or 3 different friends who actually write books. I have discussed it with, but it hasn't been for a while. Right, I just been too busy with all the stuff we got going on right now. But there is something there, and I have, spoke to college students on several occasions, and I enjoy doing that. The gentleman hired me to work in motorsports in 1990, runs the sports administration program in Cleveland State. I live in Akron. Cleveland State is 35 minutes from here. And we have talked about, maybe be an adjunct professor there to teach class and stuff like that, which could be interesting if on very less guest speaking. Yeah, I would absolutely love doing that. Because I think I do have some mistakes I made I can pass on that don't do it that way, and career decisions that they haven't been all the best moves, but there's some good moves too in there. And as a boss of mine used to tell me, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And I've had a little luck on my side. So
yeah,
I would always say, but I agree.
very, very good advice. And I've done said, yeah, we can do that. Of course we'll do that. Okay, then we talk to the guy. Okay, how the hell are we going to do this? I actually had a meeting last week with something called Gumball 3000. Do you know what that is? It's a high-end, rich people, celebrity car rally. It's not a real race, but car rally over. And I think one they got coming up next September is going to start like at the pyramids, depending on where the war's at going on over there, and going to Thailand. I mean, it's crazy. It's a 3,000 mile race or rally, and all these top end cars and stuff like that. And say, oh yeah, sure, of course we do that. I started thinking, I go, that's the most complex thing I've ever heard about how you shoot that,
Yeah.
I do have an idea how you do it, because I was making analogies with like the Tour de France. Have you ever watched that? That's a technical marvel how they cover the Tour de France of helicopters and moving every day for, I think they race 21 races in 23 days, 24 days, something like that.
Yeah.
In the month of July. And I always love it because you see the countryside of France. It's just a cool event. Of course, the competition's always cool, but it's a technical marvel how they shoot that with motorcycles and helicopters. You're moving your studios every day. It's incredible what they put in to do that.
Well, I can safely say that we would both advocate on behalf of the book, I'm sure. If the sumo wrestling doesn't take up too much of your time, that is, when you're trying to take it easy in 2024. But Mike, I can't thank you enough for your time and what an interesting, incredible career you've had. And we can't wait to see what happens for you with Trilogy TV and 2024 and the future, whatever it brings you. It's been such an honor to chat with you. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Make sure to listen, follow, and subscribe to Empire Boxing on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.